Phil Collins is a singer, drummer, and songwriter who's from London, England. He started his entertainment career playing the Artful Dodger in a West End production of Oliver, the musical. And in the late 60s, he pivoted into a musical career and joined Genesis as their new drummer in 1970, just in time for them to start become really popular and start becoming really progressive. After Peter Gabriel left Genesis in 1975, Phil Collins took over lead vocal duties, partly because he sounded somewhat similar in voice tone to Peter Gabriel. He took some persuading to do this. Also, by that time, he joined jazz rock band Brand X as their drummer. In 1981, he released his first solo album, and through the 80s, he went on to have a solo career that eclipsed Genesis's career. In 1996, having divided his time between solo work and Genesis, he officially left the band. He then sporadically reunited with Genesis, spent some time retired, but has been active again for the past 10 years as I record this in 2025. He has released 8 solo studio albums thus far. Hi, my name's Dan, and this is my mini review of the album Face Value by Phil Collins, which was released in 1981 and was his first solo album. And I think it must be my first time listening to this as an album, although I feel like I've been in proximity of copies of this album many times, because it seemed to be in the record collections of a lot of my friends. Certainly in my 20s, a lot of people seem to have copies of Phil Collins albums. I don't think I've ever acquired a Phil Collins album. Neither Acclaimed Music or Wikipedia. So I often look for genre descriptions both to Acclaimed Music and Wikipedia, and neither of them have embraced the idea that this is AOR, adult-oriented rock, or album-oriented rock. And I think that this album is as much the birth of AOR as anything can claim to be. So, in a nutshell, and this is in a very Dan biased, filtered nutshell, description of what AOR is, that some of the more enduring acts from the 70s moved on from single focus to a more album focus in the 80s. Generally, they were pop rock people, and I want to mention people like Dire Straits and Tina Turner, Sting, and Phil Collins. So this was Phil's first stretching of his solo legs. I was going to say outside Genesis, but he also was in Brand X. Stylistically, it's somewhat curious. So my preconceptions were that this was going to be, Phil Collins's commercial side and very much pop. But it's not as much of that as I thought it was going to be. So there are obviously more Genesis-like elements in here. In fact, I believe a couple of the tracks are tracks that were originally developed through the Genesis umbrella. But that's in context of Genesis getting more commercial through their kind of recent albums here. I'm not quite sure where we are, but Duke and Abacab, rather than back in their Selling England by the Pound kind of era of very proggy sort of stuff. The first track on the album is In the Air Tonight, which is seminal, which has this huge build. And that is, I would say, semi-Genesis in feel to it. And it's one of the most well-known bits of drumming in it. There. And then it goes on and it starts to do more kind of bouncy, poppy stuff with brass. And it's the brass that really changes the sound of it, particularly. But then also there's a couple of slow piano-based love songs or breakup songs. And apparently the focus of this album is on his divorce that he was going through or had just gone through at this point. As I listened through, I reckon there's a few songs that relate to that, but maybe not as strong as an emphasis as the stuff that's written about the album seems to imply. Maybe I'm picking it up wrong. Then there's things like instrumentals like Drone, and hand in hand that hark back more to this kind of prog roots. Apparently, he was exploring the idea of instrumental passages that weren't based on having a solo instrument over the top. It was just exploring the feel and a continuum of music, and it's definitely done that in here. There's different stuff here to the extent that it feels like it's got a split personality as a record. It's like he can't quite let go of the prog light that Genesis are becoming for and for and his he does move into this more as his solo career goes on, and but he does have some more happy stuff, and he's going a bit more Creole on the coconuts at times in here. And then we've got The Roof Is Leaking, which just stuck out to me as completely different to everything else on the album, which was a song involving a banjo. And then we've got the trademark Pouring His Heart Out at the Piano songs, which is the side of Phil Collins that sold very, very well indeed, but is my least favourite shade of Collins, I would say. One major aspect here is the drums, as you'd expect. But the thing that was, at the time, I believe, very unexpected was the combination of drums and a drum machine. Phil Collins, he's known as a drummer. The first thing you hear when the album starts is a drum machine. And that's, I think, making a statement deliberately. And he did this thing of combining this kind of metronomic pulse of a drum machine with the expressiveness of real drums, most famously on that Phil, as in the Phil from Phil, in the middle of In the Air Tonight. He also uses this is the introduction of the gated snare sound that became hugely popular in the years to come after this. Everybody wanted to have the Phil Collins gated snare sound, or a lot of people did. His musicality is really good. His singing's pretty good. His songwriting for me is a bit patchy, but for the mainstream world, it sold really well. So I've got mixed feelings about this album, but it's still, there's enough of it that's strong and enjoyable and more than I expected coming into this. So he has changed my expectations of him. Um, uh, but that's what I think. I know that Phil Collins has got, his solo work definitely got some negative reaction, particularly, I think, from people who preferred the deeper Genesis stuff. He was hugely popular, and that always seems to engender a certain amount of negativity towards people. I want to keep myself open as I'm making these reviews and not just, way too popular kind of judgment. But that might be how you feel about Phil Collins. And if you do, then maybe give this a try if you haven't actually before. But I'd love to know what you think of the album. So please leave me a comment. But that's it from me for now.
Just as I thought I'd made it, you walk back into my life, just like you never left.